thing that I see that people are missing on is creating vision for their business, where they want to go, and really getting clear on distilling that down. Some people say, oh, I want to grow to 5 locations. Okay, let's talk about what that means. Let's talk about how your sales breakdown is going to be. Let's talk about what you're going to need in order to get there.
You're listening to the Bar Business Podcast, where every week your host, Chris Schneider, brings you information, strategies, and news on the bar industry, giving you the competitive edge you need to start working on your bar rather than in your bar.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Bar Business Podcast, your ultimate resource for bar owners. I'm your host, Chris Schneider. In today's episode, we are joined by Christin Marvin. Christin has about 20 years experience in the hospitality industry, both in bars and restaurants. She's kind of been everywhere within hospitality, from things we would think of as almost more, I don't want to say fast food, but ice cream shops, where it's a little bit more counter service related. She's been in fine dining. She's worked bars. She's worked restaurants. She's worked hotels. So she has a vast range of experience all over the industry. And she is currently working as a leadership coach. And so we'll get into that in a little bit. But the first thing that we really wanted to talk about was her new book, which dropped yesterday. So if you're listening to this on the release date, it was yesterday. If you're not, that was October 15th of 2024. And her book is called The Hospitality Leader's Roadmap, which is just this wonderful combination of her personal journey and personal stories with all of the leadership lessons that she has learned over the course of her career, and is in some ways very unique because she's combined her experience, her passion, the troubles that she's had, the successes she's had, and used herself as the example to really hammer in some very important lessons that everyone in bars and restaurants should understand when it comes to leadership. And in addition to her book, in addition to her coaching, she also hosts the No Hesitations Restaurant Leadership Podcast, which, if that's not one that you listen to, you should put it in your rotation. So with that, Christin, thank you for being here. And I know that I hopefully got a lot of your background, but there's so much there. So go ahead and fill in anything that you think that we missed real quick.
Well, thank you. Thanks for taking the time. Thank you for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it, and love that we've become connected through this journey. That intro was incredible, and I could not have said it better myself. But even hearing that, I'm like, I did a lot of shit in a short amount of time. It's a good to hear that. So thank you so much.
So first thing I want to get into today is the book, because obviously that dropped yesterday. And as I mentioned in the intro, it's a little bit of a different format. And most of that focuses on your personal journey. And so before we get into your personal journey specifically, because it's interesting to me as someone that's written a book and is working on another, what drove you to write a book?
Yeah. That, writing a book was something that I never, ever thought I would do. When I started my company, Solutions by Christin, my primary goal was and still is to be a coach and to support restaurant owners and operators. In the course of my 20 years in the industry, though, I know and understand and have seen that there is a huge lack of leadership development resources, especially that are really personalized, right? Because no restaurant runs the same way, and no leader is the same in the industry. Mm-hmm. And so my mission is to create as many resources as possible. So I started with obviously the coaching side of the business. And then I started kind of looking at, how can I reach everybody based on how they learn and what I understand of how people have learned and how I've taught people in the industry, and try to create things that really fit with restaurant owners and operators' really busy schedules, right? How can I reach them, adding something additional to their workload? And so I thought, well, social media content will be great if somebody needs a little nugget for pre-shift on their way in, or a little moment of inspiration for themselves. Newsletters would be a really great way to start if somebody wants 2 or 3 minutes of reading, material if they're on break or wherever they are. And then naturally, the podcast made a lot of sense. I was like, wow, intimately, I could be in somebody's ear if they're on the line or in the office or whatever. This is great. And then, I just kind of started building, and I got the idea to also kind of started to look and see what was out there. And I thought to myself, you know what? When I was in my early 20s and I read Setting the Table, which I have behind me, it really made a huge impact on my life and was something I could really relate to. And I wanted to create that tool for people too. So if owners are on a day off or on vacation and they want to listen to an audiobook or they want to actually sit down and read something and they want to have somebody that they can relate to and also have some stories and lessons that they can learn and apply to every single point in their career, whether it's line cook, GM, AGM, regional manager, managing partner. I wanted to be able to provide that. And the book was a huge stretch for me, something that I've never, like I said, dreamed about doing or thought I could do. And so it was a really great challenge for me to get really uncomfortable and challenge my own growth and leadership and just do something a little outside the box for me.
Well, I'm glad you did because it turned out really good. And
Thank
with
you.
that, one thing that you mentioned was trying to make something that's approachable to people.
Mm.
And one thing I will say that I really enjoyed going through your book that not everyone does is you have shorter chapters, right? I can read, you can read it in 5 to 10 minute bites.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things with a lot of the restaurant books out there that's difficult is when you have, you sit down to read a chapter and it takes you 45 minutes. That's not very approachable for a restaurant owner or a bar owner. Whereas with what you have, you can get through it pretty quick. And there's always a good stopping point if you get pulled away.
Yeah.
Which is something I try to do with mine as well. And I think it makes it a lot more approachable for bar and restaurant owners.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of your book is based on your personal journey. And I will say you have a very interesting personal journey. There's a lot of ups, there's a lot of downs.
Yeah.
And you are very raw through your book. And it's something that I will say surprised me a little bit. Because I don't know that I would have the courage to write down in paper and publish for the world anything quite as raw as what you did. And so let's talk through your personal journey a little bit and kind of, because a lot of the takeaways in the book, a lot of the leadership examples that you put out are built off that personal journey and what you learn at different stages. So let's talk through that a little bit and kind of what that journey has been for you and then what you learned at different stages of your career.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. And I don't know if you went through the same process when you wrote, but I really just sat down and just kind of word vomited everything right through 100 and, 75 pages. And then starting to cut down and I worked with a coach around this, but she said, you want a lesson at the end of every chapter. And when I started to cut it up into pieces, I loved how it unfolded because I have a short attention span. I've never really been a strong reader. So I get a couple pages in and then I forget what I'm reading and I get frustrated and then I go back to it, right? Or I put it down and move on. So I love the short chapters. I've had a few friends in the industry start reading it and text me. They're like, I breezed through this. This was great. I love the small chapters too. So that was actually really fun to just kind of see how it kind of naturally came to be. I started my journey, as many people did, at 15 years old as a line cook, and then became got my first front of house job at a chain restaurant when I was 19, which I loved because it provided a lot of systems and structure for me. And it was the busiest restaurant in Colorado at the time of that restaurant group, and so I got to see how systems really created success and helped me build confidence and supported me as an employee, which is something that a huge lesson that I've carried with me throughout the entire independent restaurant, time that I've had, which I just love. And then, I did that for about a year and a half or so. And I started serving and bartending. My first night in the Well outside of training was the night we had a concert right next door. I got completely slaughtered in the Well before the concert. I was covered in sticky peach schnapps and just sticky syrups and frozen margaritas and beer. And that's just when I fell in love with the industry. I just kind of took a step back, looked at myself for a second and said, what the hell was that moment? I want more of it. So that was kind of when I got hooked in. And, that chapter that's chapter 2, sex, drugs, and alcohol. At 19, I was exposed to all of that, coming from being an introverted girl from a small Midwestern town to this kind of party lifestyle, really kind of brought out a different side of me and an extroverted side. And I learned how to start selling, which I didn't really understand that, until I read this book or wrote this book. From there, I spent 5 years in a beautiful 5-star, 5-diamond resort. Kind of just went to a job fair one day and applied on a whim, and was interviewed by a very charming Irishman who convinced me to take a job as a cocktail server. And that opportunity over the next 5 years provided so many wonderful learning lessons for me. I'm getting a SOM certification, studying with master mixologists out of New York, opening up my first fine dining concept, working for my mentor who worked for Danny Meyer, working for a Michelin star chef. I mean, just so many gorgeous opportunities, hiring in a wonderful team of people that were just so bought in, being in a tip pool environment where everybody was just supporting everyone. We were learning, and I was learning culture about food and wine. It was gorgeous. One of my favorite times. And then I met my husband studying wine, doing a project in college together. We were both marketing majors, and met the first day of my last class. He graduated college and immediately started selling wine to restaurants, and fell in love with that side of the industry. And we moved to Denver and became a huge part of the Denver dining scene when it was just exploding, 2007, 2008, and beyond. And independent chefs were opening 4 to 5 to 6 different concepts all over town. It was just a huge playground of excitement. So eating and drinking became a huge sport for us. That was our main hobby. And everybody in our friend group was just a big part of that community too. And so I was lucky enough to be able to land a killer job right in the heart of downtown Denver at an Italian restaurant that was 2 weeks from opening. I was the GM. We had half the staff hired, and we opened the doors, and we were doing 600 covers out of the gate on the busy nights, and turning our 2 private dining rooms for 2 turns each every Friday and Saturday night. It was just incredible, the volume that we were doing there, and the staff was amazing, and still very connected with a lot of them today. So saw that opportunity, that there was opportunity to grow with the company, and that husband and wife team had wanted to open 5 additional concepts plus more in town, and raised my hand, advocated for myself, and asked to be a partner eventually. And that turned into also being, having hands in HR and events and training and leadership development for new openings, and, running the Cat 5 cable through the ceilings with our POS guy. When you're in the independent space, you wear a lot of hats, right? So that was a great learning experience as well. And opening a different concept every year was just a blast. We didn't really know what we were doing. We were just experimenting, and it was fun and innovative and creative, and I loved it. And then we opened a restaurant, and it failed, and I invested in it. And experiencing failure on that level and at that with that amount of stress was something that I had never experienced before. I didn't even see as a possibility in my world. And I truly believed, I think we all did in that group, that the brand had such strong legs and was so well known that we were kind of invincible. And we quickly learned that we weren't. So anyway, that really shifted my whole perspective around what partnership meant to me. I was very determined to be a restaurant owner by the time I was 30, and I had become a managing partner, but then I realized I didn't want that after going through that experience. And so I decided to join a local group that had 6 concepts of the same brand, and they had 5 in Colorado, 1 in California. And I took a step back in my career, and I wanted to be a GM. I thought that I had more to learn. When you go into that independent space and you really start to grow, and you wear so many hats, sometimes it's difficult. I found it difficult to really specialize in one area. I didn't have a clearly defined role. I was kind of figuring it out and solving problems as I went. And knowing what I know now, if I would have really sat down and said, here's what this job needs to be with the owners, of course, here's what this job needs to be, here's what my area of focus is going to be, here's what we need, I think I would have been even more successful and happy in that role. So anyway, moving on to take a step back to be a GM, and just kind of wanting to implement more systems in a company that needed some, was a great opportunity. It was I was managing the busiest location in the company. And 2 weeks after I got hired, they sat me down and told me that they had brought in private equity money and we were going to be expanding on a national level. And I went, fuck, what did I just do? This was not, I never wanted to work for a chain in leadership. I never wanted to work for a corporation. I had a very bad taste of it just, negative, I think, perception of what that meant. And so anyway, I quickly, I wasn't a very emotional person back in the day and not very vulnerable and good at kind of hiding my emotions. So I went home, I drank it off. I got back up the next day. I said, let's go. Let's do this. I did believe in the concept. I knew it had legs, and I was with them for 7 years in a GM capacity and then moved into a regional role. And we went from 6 to 48 locations in 7 years. So we changed everything. Every system we had in the business was replaced by tech. And we were moving at the speed of light and trying to figure out how to, for me, become the expert in all these new tech systems and also teach the teams and manage 6 restaurants and 36 managers. And at a point, we had stopped growing in my region. And that was when I really took a step back and realized that I was really unhappy in my role. I was not getting along with my direct boss. And instead of moving away from that opportunity, I chose to hang on because I loved my team. And I had a couple really strong allies in the business. And I chose to drink pretty heavily to cover up that stress and unhappiness and anxiety around that. So I eventually moved on and went to work for a local group again and kind of start where I wanted to be 7 years prior. We were going to grow from 6 to 20 locations. That was in the ice cream world. And I got to design my training. I was fully empowered, feeling creative, getting autonomy back, and had all these grand visions of what I wanted to do with the team and saw the opportunities in the company and started to implement that plan. And then the pandemic hit. And all the creativity went out the window because just like everybody else, we were being forced to do things that we had to do in order to survive and keep people safe. And I started to really isolate myself more and only go out when I necessarily needed to for safety of the teams. And then that my drinking just really started to increase and increase and increase. And then it got to a really dangerous level with both my husband and myself. And we knew if we didn't stop, we were going to die. So we cleaned up our act and then decided to redesign our lifestyle, move, sell what we had, and start over. So here I am.
Well, that is quite the journey for sure. And a few things in there that I just want to touch on. One of them was that second chapter you were talking about where it was partying and all that. When I read that, I got a little nostalgic because not that it was good, but what was going on like the late 90s, early 2000s, especially around fine dining, does not exist anymore.
Yeah.
And I was in that back then as well. And that kind of, there's some definite nostalgia to that old party scene and how things were. And, but there's definitely some, well, let's just say positive health consequences, at least on my end, for the fact that it went away. Because the way we used to party back then, it's not sustainable.
No, I mean, there's still ship drinks. There's still, right. People are still going out, there's still cocaine at the parties, still do it every single night. It just became a habit. But, I was 19 going to school full time and working full time and living alone. It was like, well, in a new community of people trying to fit in, that was what we did. That was how we did it. So,
yeah. And obviously all that stuff still exists. It's been at least 20 years since I've seen shift lines on a bar, put it that way.
Yeah.
With how it used to be. And it's really a healthy change for the industry overall.
Yeah.
But then moving forward a little bit, and you mentioned this, and it's definitely in the book a lot, the stress of being an owner.
Yeah.
So going from managing for the one restaurant group to being a managing partner. So in a lot of ways, and tell me if I'm wrong, but the impression I get from the book is that your job didn't particularly change as far as you were in charge of running a store.
Yeah.
But as soon as your own money was on the line, as soon as it was yours, the consequences of your actions changed.
100%.
And just how much extra stress that is.
It's insane. When you think about investing in a restaurant, opening a restaurant, I'm talking to a client about this right now. There's a deal in front of you and it seems so exciting. And so you just think it's going to be successful. You've got the tools, you've got people in the organization that are raising their hand that want to be a part of it. You don't think about failure. You don't think about the stress. You just, if a thought of like that even came into my mind or somebody said to me, this is going to be stressful, I wouldn't even have listened to it at the time. I would have been like, you know what, I got this. I've been doing this for a long time, right? My ego would have definitely led the charge there. We invested $10,000. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was to us at the time. And I think where I misstepped there was I thought that $10,000 was going to give me a much larger voice in the overall decisions of that business. So when things started to go wrong and guests started to really complain and guest traffic was down and we were having operations meetings going, shit, what are we going to do? And started to brainstorm things, I found a lot of my ideas were or the feedback we were getting from guests that what they didn't like about the restaurant wasn't being listened to. That was really hard for me. And then I started to feel like I was kind of losing control. Not that I'm a control freak by any means, but I was losing my voice. And that was really uncomfortable. And then I'd lay in bed at night and go, how else can we bring people in the doors? I had never had to worry about how to get people in the doors. When you work for a hotel, you've got a marketing and sales team, right? And all these other things to draw people in. When you work for a busy downtown location where you're doing 600 covers on a Friday and Saturday night, top line sales are beautiful, but we all know they cure all. You don't have to worry about how to get people in the door. This was a whole new experience for me at what should have been the top of my game. And I didn't have a toolkit. I didn't know what to do. And I think I was surrounded by some people that didn't know what to do either. And that was really, really, really scary. And something we hadn't planned for.
Well, and I will use this opportunity to put in a shameless plug real quick for both of us, which is why you hire coaches.
Yes.
Right?
Yep,
because
totally.
you get to that stress level and that's where the coaching comes in. That's where outside opinions become valuable. Now, I will also point out that in the book, it seems pretty clear that part of your problem in that period was your partners, right? I mean, you had other folks in ownership that had a vision and could outvote you, that were more worried about their vision than the customer feedback.
Yeah. There was, it was a chef-driven concept. The measure of success for them was opening as many concepts as humanly possible. The measure for success for me was making sure our teams were happy and feeling empowered and developed. And I saw a tremendous amount of opportunities with all of our concepts of things that we needed to tighten up and strengthen and strategize on. My old boss used to give me shit about calling a meeting. He's like, you fucking love your meetings. We need to communicate. We need to get people on the same page here. We need to align. We need to talk about what's actually happening in the business. And there wasn't that. And so it very much felt like we were kind of divided into as far as where we wanted to go. And once I kind of saw the writing on the wall that those top line sales didn't matter to them and they were going to continue to push forward and somehow manage that stress differently by kind of channeling it into a different project and leaving the other ones by the wayside, I was like, I don't think like that. Sense to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and it doesn't really make sense.
Totally.
Like because I was reading that and I'm like, and it was one of those things that the way you wrote it, as I'm going through it, I could see it like you gave these little hints of it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, they're gonna screw her.
Yeah.
And then I get a couple pages later, I'm like, oh yeah, they screwed her. Like this is.
Well, and there's a lot of things,
but it's such a great lesson.
Oh my gosh, it really was. I mean, I've got a client right now who's getting ready to enter a partnership, and I'm like, let me give you some tips here, and read through that agreement, understand what partnership actually means to you, and make sure you're communicating those expectations. And then what happens if it doesn't work? What's your out strategy here, right? We know 80% of restaurants fail in the first 5 years. At 30 years old, I was just naive, and I didn't want to think about that.
Well, who does? Because,
it's not sexy.
If a bunch of people fail, I'm not the one that's going to fail.
Totally.
And that's the bias that we all have, right? And then the other thing too that kind of struck me as we were talking through your background and reading the book is a lot of folks have corporate experience. A lot of folks have independent experience. There aren't many people that have bounced back and forth the way you have. And throughout the book, you talk about corporate managers that are micromanagers. You focus on corporate managers that are just kind of dicks and and I don't know a better way to put it. But just dicks in the way that corporate people can be dicks about KPIs and did you hit your numbers and did you hit your number? Like, I don't care about anything, but did you hit your numbers? Because this is all that matters to us. And you also talk about independents that don't have numbers and screw up for that reason as well. So it gives a really rounded perspective. And so because of that, let me ask this question. What is the one thing that corporations have right? And what is the one thing they have the most wrong? And then we can do the same with independence.
Yeah, I think you really touched on it, right? I think independents have an extraordinary amount of passion and care for their people and are really great at making some emotional decisions and really living in the moment and are really, really in touch with their guests because they are right there. They're present with them. They can feel that energy. They feel the experience. They're really good at giving great hospitality. I think as you grow and scale, the challenge becomes how do you stay connected to your people? How do you stay connected to that level of hospitality? And you have to create systems in order to do that. But it's easy to focus more on the KPIs when you're in a corporate world than it is people. And so therein lies, and the company that I worked for was very people focused. We just had a leader who I didn't think was a cultural fit. And so the gap, we kind of talked about this earlier before we started recording, but the gap between the independents and the chains is that corporations can measure, they've got visibility into every single aspect of their business. Independents don't because they can't afford the tech or they don't want the tech. And so, but the hospitalities, in my mind, some of them have much better hospitality than what you're going to find in a chain restaurant. And I know some people, I know a lot of the corporations are trying to change that. If we can help close that gap on helping independents run smarter businesses, they're going to be more successful down the road and be able to compete more with the larger chains and corporations.
And so in a lot of ways here, just to transition us into the coaching side of what you do, it's that combination, right, of the KPIs and the numbers that you get from the corporate side and loving people and customers and all that on the independent side. If you can get those two pieces to combine in leadership for a bar or a restaurant, you're a lot more likely to win.
Absolutely. If you can make more decisions based on data than emotion, you're going to win more often, right?
Yeah. But you can't totally forget the emotion, right? Because you got to remember the people. So there's this weird kind of balancing act. Yeah. And I know through your podcast and through your coaching experience, coaching program, coaching practice, I don't know what we want to call it.
Sure.
But through your coaching and through your podcast, you focus really on leadership.
Yeah.
And finding ways to enable leaders to be able to hit both sides of that, right? Both the people and the KPIs. So when we're talking about leadership and hospitality and how to make people effective, both at making money and hitting numbers, but also at managing great teams and providing a great community for their customers, what are the largest kind of gaps, the largest issues, the largest roadblocks that you see that owners in the industry are facing?
The number one thing that I see that people are missing on is creating vision for their business, where they want to go, and really getting clear and distilling that down. Some people say, I want to grow to 5 locations. Okay, let's talk about what that means. Let's talk about how your sales breakdown is going to be. Let's talk about what you're going to need in order to get there. Do you want to hire internally? You want to hire externally? What does your marketing look like? Community, sustainability, right? Getting really, really clear on everything that vision's going to hold, because you've got to do the same thing with your mission. And then you've got to make sure that you are sharing that with your team, your leadership teams and everybody. So everyone is moving in the same direction and they've got buy-in. They understand why they're doing what they're doing, because that flows through to the guests and all of your marketing and everything else. So the lack of vision is the big one. The other key piece that I work a lot with leaders on is just designing their leadership style, understanding how they want to show up, who they want to be as a leader, and then figuring out how to go execute that and doing the exact same thing for their teams. Because once they understand what leadership they currently have in their organization or what type of leadership they want to have, then they know exactly who they need to go find. in order to fill those gaps and to fill that team and make their organization really strong. But some leaders have to get out of their own way. They have to realize what they're really good at. So I work a lot on helping them build their confidence and then really understanding what their shortcomings are so they can hire people to complement that, because it's having an independent operator who usually is working solo, putting pressure on themselves to be the expert in everything is not going to work. And that's not the expectation, but a lot of people expect that from themselves. If they can really understand where their weaknesses are and be open enough to bringing people on the team that are going to help complement that, whether it's in an hourly role and just giving them a little bit more responsibility or hiring somebody full time, it's going to help their business be successful in the long term and help work-life balance be more sustainable for everyone involved, especially that owner.
And you kind of hit it on there, and you hit on it in the book as well. Basically, in ownership, you have to have the right mindset, right? And so what tools, what thought processes, how especially as an independent operator, because you're getting beat up all the time. To your point, you think you have to do 1,000 things. Everyone expects you to understand, plumbing and refrigerator repair and accounting and how the TVs work and know everything about beer and wine. Like, that's the amount of knowledge, to your point, is far beyond what any one person could actually have.
Yeah.
So in that kind of high pressure, stressful type environment, how do you develop a mindset that actually allows you to be a good leader?
Yeah. One of the beautiful things about coaching, and you know this well, is that the first and most important thing that we do for operators is we give them an opportunity to slow down. 1 hour every other week with people, giving them an opportunity to slow down, think deeply about their business, strategize, look at options when they have tough decisions coming in, weigh those options out, and then carefully craft a plan in order to move forward. And then there's some commitments and accountability stuff that we build in there together too. But how often are people doing that in the restaurant business? Not very often, unless they've got a team of people, right, that they can strategize with. A lot of them don't take the time. They're moving 1,000,000 miles an hour. A lot of restaurant operators are still picking up shifts, especially these days with staffing being really, really tough and people in the industry being more inexperienced than they ever have been before. So giving people the opportunity to slow down is really important. In that process of helping people slow down, though, I work a lot with self-awareness and positive intelligence, helping people really understand their thought process and how their thoughts are impacting their stress and their anxiety and their frustrations. So we recognize those thoughts, and then I teach them and help them develop how to manage those, which takes time, and help them set boundaries and get more confident in going into the tough conversations that they need to have. Whether it's, I had a phone call yesterday with one of my clients, like, do I fire this employer or do I coach them? So we talked about that. The same thing. I had a client the day before too. This person's not reliable. They're not showing up, but I'm worried about this. What do I do? Right. And it's about understanding how they want to show up as a leader, but also how they want to have empathy and take care of their people. And what kind of leader they want to be for the organization. Do they want to have a culture of quick to hire, quick to fire? Or do they want to have a culture of coaching and development, which obviously increases morale and leads to a more sustainable restaurant? So it's really about teaching the leaders how to be coaches themselves and slow down and be really thoughtful about every single aspect of their business.
When something that people that have listened to this podcast before have heard me say in the past, and that you just said as well, the mindset leads to the culture, right? Because, and that's, again, throughout your book, very evident. The different leaders have different cultures that are sometimes different from even the corporate culture in these organizations because of their individual mindsets. And I think a lot of times owners don't necessarily realize, like, even if you're just in a bad mood today, that has a ripple effect across your culture and your folks and how they're acting. So is there any one thing or a few things that you think as an industry we don't do that we should do?
One of the reasons I went so hard on this book and committed to being raw was because I was not a vulnerable leader.
Mhm.
I, kind of growing up in fine dining, well, it goes back to that. I was raised in a household where my parents didn't show a lot of emotion, or if they did, it was anger. And so, an only child, and again, an introvert. So I kept to myself a lot. A very private person, very methodical. And fine dining, I was raised to, you wear a uniform, everybody looks the same. You show up, you do your job, you keep your shit at the door. We didn't talk about mental health. We didn't talk about bad days. I never went into the restaurant and told the staff, I'm having a really hard time today, guys. I could really use your help. Rally. Can you rally for me? I never did that. I just got up and I pushed on. And that only hurt me and did
Mhm.
more damage in the long run. And I had to spend a lot of time unpacking all that and figuring out how to manage all that. So one of the things that we don't do enough in this business is, I think, let people show up as their authentic selves. I also used to view highly emotional people as dramatic and chaotic, and people in the restaurant that I did not want to have anything to do with. Somebody, I talk about this in the book too, if somebody showed up at an interview and they were highly emotional, or they were, whatever, talking about unhappy things, I did not hire them because I did not want that in the restaurant. Instead of listening to them and just being supportive and being an ear and giving them time to process that stuff, or asking them, if they needed some support or resources or tools, that would have been a much better approach, and part of the book sales from October 15th to the end of the year are going to go to Chow, which is an organization that helps provide wellness resources and tools around mental health and substance abuse to people in the hospitality industry. And we have online and in-person meetings. We have a beautiful tech system that operators can use every day to teach managers and leaders how to have conversations with teammates so that they can really be real and be vulnerable and get to the core of who people are. And if we create a more supportive and inclusive environment in the restaurant industry, we're going to reduce turnover, which is plaguing our industry right now.
I couldn't agree more. Now, with Chow, are you on the board of Chow?
Yeah.
Did I see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So real quick on Chow, because I think that the mission there is very cool. You kind of laid it out real quick, but what resources are available to people? What can they go there and get? And
Oh my gosh, so much.
kind of let's dive into that real quick.
Totally. So if you go on their website, so chowco.org, there is a list of mental health resources and wellness resources, partners on the website. You can find anything you want there: suicide prevention, substance abuse, mental health. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff there for you. There's probably 50 plus resources there. We do meetings, so on Zoom and in person, 4 days a week, I believe, in different cities. So we're in Denver, and then we're also in DC. Expanded to DC. In those meetings, I love that we do this. We start off with just a little kind of roundtable check-in. So we use a temperature gauge like you would in a kitchen. So we start by asking people if you're rare, mid-rare, well, mid-well, and well. And there's categories or characteristics in each of those categories. And we just kind of go around and we talk about where we're at. We just share. There's no questions. Everything's confidential. It's just a really, really safe space for people to be able to share. And then we typically ask a question and have people kind of contribute around that concept for that meeting. So it's a really great space for people to be able to show up whenever they want to show up. You can be on camera or off. And like I said, we also have this text service. So you can enroll on the website and you can there's some images and then quick texts that come in every single day that help you have conversations with your team. Do a little check-in today. Here's a little side work that you can do today. Here's how you're self-soothing. How are you self-soothing? How are you helping your team self-soothe? So there's all kinds of resources there. And then we offer an Amuse course that we can come teach the teams on how to talk about mental health. If you have something happen in your restaurant, how to handle those type of conversations, what things to look for instead of just ignoring the signs. We teach people how to identify them and then act on them and support people in the industry.
Well, and that's fantastic because to the point you were making a second ago, the leave it at the door. I mean, I came up in fine dining as well, and that's exactly what it was, right?
Yeah.
It's we don't really give a shit about your life.
Yeah.
Just show up and do the work,
Yeah.
and then when you leave, you can have whatever life you want. We don't even care. And so getting past that as an industry is, I think, really important because it was not healthy back then. So with that, I mean, we're getting towards the end of our time. Is there anything that we have not covered yet that you would like to talk about?
I think so. I mean, you and I could go down rabbit holes all day long on leadership and management, on mindset, on sharing some stories of clients that we're working with. But I think, my hope and my dream is that in the next 10 to 15 years, every single restaurant has a coach to provide what we provide for people in a safe space in a one-on-one capacity for minimal investment from a financial perspective and time perspective, helps people de-stress, set boundaries, be happier, be more fulfilled, have clear visions, lead with more focus and intention every single shift, and manage uncomfortable situations better than they ever have before. And I think the biggest value that I found in working with a coach, I know it was life-saving for me when I was trying to quit drinking and find my way forward, was that I had somebody on my side. I had somebody that was cheering for me, who was calling me out on my bullshit, who was holding me accountable, but somebody that I could call if I needed something that was just an unbiased person outside of the organization and outside of my spouse, right? Because they don't get it. They're supportive, but they don't get it, right? They could tell me the same thing my coach tells me, and I want to hear it completely different. So I just think,
100%.
I think everybody needs a coach. And I'm not just saying that as a plug. I truly believe it because I've experienced it, witnessed it, fell in love with it. And it was, I started this business because and this was my favorite part of what I did for 20 years. When I was able to sit down at a two-top with somebody and just have a conversation, which was so rare, those were the most magical moments. And we got up from that table and our bond was stronger, our communication was better, the trust was better, assuming it was a good conversation, immediately bled into the environment and the culture of that shift.
Well, I think that's a great message. And I couldn't agree with you more. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of people that have been listening to this episode and they're like, hey, Christin sounds awesome. How do I get in contact with her? So what are the best ways for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, totally. So I'll plug the book again on Amazon, October 15th, ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you want to, I would love if you're listening and you're in Tucson or Denver and you want to let's get together in person. I'm going to have launch parties for the book. Come get a book signed for you or buy some copies for your team. 2 launch parties in Denver. One is going to be October 14th at Golden Mill in Golden from 4 to 6. The other one is going to be on Tuesday, October 15th at the Hangar Club over at Aurora from 4 to 6 p.m. Then in Tucson on Wednesday, October 30th from 5 to 7, we'll be at the MSA Annex at Westbound Tap and Bottle from 5 to 7. So you can come get some books there. Otherwise, if you would love to have a conversation, I'd love to do a complimentary session for anybody listening to this show. My website is christinmarvin.com, and my name is spelled Christin.
Fantastic. So we'll put links for the book, the coaching website, the podcast, all that will be in the show notes. So if you want to learn more from Christin, all that's there for you. Just scroll down the show notes and you'll be able to see it there. I have to say, Christin, thank you so much for being here. This has been a great conversation. And I think for those of you that have listened and are intrigued here, go buy the book because it really is raw. It really is one of the better examples I've seen of how the industry is for real. There's definitely no sugarcoating there. So grab her book, get in contact with her. But again, thank you just so much for being here.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate your time. And thanks for all you're doing for the industry too.
Absolutely. So with that, folks, it's going to wrap us up for today. If you enjoy the episode, make sure you like, subscribe, leave a review. If you have not joined Bar Business Nation on Facebook, it's our Facebook group. It's really not for me to interact with y'all, but I do post a lot. But it's to try to get owners in the industry to have access to other owners in the industry so that we can swap ideas, share information, and really build a community to make us all stronger. Because so often, especially with bars, for some reason, we're combative with each other in local markets. So this way you can learn from people that are outside your local market. You don't have to worry about the local politics. So head over to Facebook, join Bar Business Nation. And with that, everyone, until next time, I hope you have a great day, and we will talk again later.
Thanks for listening to the Bar Business Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Check out our website at barbusinesspodcast.com and join our Bar Business Nation Facebook group for more strategies and tips.